Welcome to Midsummer Myths, where you'll find stories that shock, inspire, and make you rethink what's possible in everyday life. Today's story is one you won't believe until you hear every detail. It's about a moment that turned a routine traffic stop into a career-ending disaster for one cop. All because of one woman's quiet confidence and a flash of her ID. The kind of story that makes you question assumptions and reminds us all that justice sometimes comes in the most unexpected ways. The day started like any other in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The sun was just climbing over the horizon, birds chirping, kids getting ready for school. But for Judge Angela Harris, it was about to become unforgettable. Angela was running late. She had a court hearing downtown and barely had time to grab her coffee before jumping into her sleek black sedan. As she pulled out of her driveway, she noticed a police cruiser following behind her. Not unusual at first, perhaps routine patrol, but then the cruiser's lights flicked on. Pull over. The officer's voice came over the loudspeaker. Angela complied immediately. But as she rolled down the window, the tension in the air was palpable. The officer, a middle-aged white man with a stern look, approached the car with caution, his eyes scanning her license plate and then the vehicle. "Is this your car?" he asked. "Yes, officer." Angela replied calmly. "We got a report of a stolen vehicle matching this description," he said, his tone skeptical. Angela's heart pounded, but she kept her composure. The officer asked for her license and registration. As she reached into her purse to comply, the officer's suspicion didn't waver. He leaned closer, eyeing her carefully, and then made a grave mistake. He called for backup. Angela sat silently, the morning air thick with tension. The other officers arrived swiftly, crowding around her car as if preparing for a raid. What happened next shocked everyone. Seconds later, Angela calmly pulled out her judicial ID, held it up clearly for the officers to see, and said firmly, "I am Judge Angela Harris of the Superior Court." The room went quiet. The lead officer's face flushed with embarrassment as realization dawned on him. His assumptions, fueled by bias and ignorance, had just been shattered. The situation reversed. So quickly, it was almost surreal. But Angela wasn't done yet. She demanded an apology. She recorded the entire encounter on her phone, not to escalate, but to protect herself and expose the injustice that day. What started as a routine traffic stop turned into a powerful lesson about respect, authority, and the dangers of jumping. Two conclusions, and it wasn't just a personal victory. The fallout was swift and public. The officer who had accosted her was suspended pending investigation. The police department's chief issued a statement condemning the officer's actions and promising reforms. For Angela, it was a bittersweet moment. Proof that even in positions of power, black professionals face unwarranted scrutiny, but also proof that dignity and poise can topple prejudice. Asterisk sometimes. Justice doesn't come dressed in robes or courtrooms. It arrives in the form of a quiet confrontation on a suburban street, where courage and truth collide. After the initial shock of flashing her judicial ID, Angela remained calm but firm. The officers hesitated, glancing at each other nervously. The lead cop, whose face was now a deep shade of red, tried to regain control. "Ma'am, we have to verify your credentials," he said. Clearly rattled, Angela reached for her phone and began recording. "I understand, officer," she said evenly. "But let me remind you, this isn't just any vehicle. This is my car, registered under my name. I have every right to be here." Her voice was steady, but every word cut through the tension like a knife. Backup officers exchanged uneasy looks. One younger officer muttered under his breath about protocol, but no one stepped forward to support their superior. Angela's mind raced back to countless stories she'd heard from friends and colleagues, how people who looked like her were often stopped, questioned, and treated unfairly. But she had never imagined it would happen to her, not in her own neighborhood, and not by a fellow officer sworn to protect. The lead cop's insistence on suspicion seemed less about procedure and more about prejudice. She noticed subtle signs: the way he avoided eye contact, his stiff posture, and the sharp tone he used that wasn't warranted. Despite all this, Angela's training kicked in. Years on the bench had taught her to assess facts, control emotions, and seek justice without rage. This was a test, not just of her identity, but of everything she stood for. As the minutes dragged on, neighbors began to notice the commotion. Some watched from behind curtains. Others stepped out, curious but cautious. Angela felt the weight of those silent eyes, yet she refused to back down. Suddenly, one of the backup officers, a veteran with kind eyes, approached and quietly confirmed her identity with dispatch. The tension in the air began to dissipate, replaced by an awkward silence. The lead officer had no choice but to apologize, but his words felt hollow. Angela made it clear this encounter was unacceptable. She demanded the police chief launch a full investigation into the officer's conduct. She knew this was bigger than one mistaken stop. It was about the systemic biases embedded in law enforcement. This confrontation marked the beginning of a storm. The community rallied around Angela, sharing their own experiences of discrimination. Social media lit up with hashtags demanding accountability. Local news outlets picked up the story, turning what could have been a private humiliation into a public reckoning. Angela's bravery sparked conversations about race, authority, and respect, conversations that many had long avoided. For her, this moment was a reminder that sometimes the battle for justice is fought outside the courtroom, on the uneven ground of everyday life. When power clashes with truth, the fallout can shake institutions and change lives forever. The police department quickly realized this incident couldn't be swept under the rug. The officer who stopped Angela was placed on administrative leave pending a formal inquiry. The chief held an emergency press conference, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. "I want to assure the public," the chief said, "that this department does not tolerate discrimination or misconduct. We will conduct a thorough investigation and take appropriate action." But behind closed doors, tensions ran high. Some officers felt the department was being unfairly scrutinized. Others feared damage to their reputation and questioned leadership decisions. Angela, meanwhile, prepared for the fight ahead. She knew this wasn't just about vindication, it was about changing a system that too often failed people like her. Her attorney drafted a civil rights complaint, and community leaders offered support for what they called a watershed moment in police accountability. Social media continued to amplify the story. Videos of the traffic stop went viral, sparking debates across the country. Some applauded Angela's poise and courage. Others questioned whether the officer's actions were truly motivated by bias or simple protocol. But Angela's supporters weren't deterred. They organized rallies, held forums, and petitioned for reform in police training on racial sensitivity. For Angela, the experience was emotionally taxing. She grappled with feelings of anger, disappointment, and resolve. But she channeled those emotions into activism. determined to turn a personal affront into societal progress. The officer involved faced a disciplinary hearing. Evidence from body cams, dash cams, and witnesses painted a troubling picture. It became clear that his judgment had been clouded by implicit bias. The hearing concluded with the officer being terminated, a rare but necessary consequence. The verdict sent ripples through the department and community alike. Angela's story became a symbol of resilience and the possibility of change when individuals stand firm against injustice. Sometimes the smallest actions carry the heaviest consequences, and the flash of an ID can topple a career in the aftermath. Angela received an outpouring of support from colleagues, civil rights groups, and everyday citizens. Invitations to speak at universities and panels poured in. She used the platform to highlight not only her experience, but the broader issues of systemic racism in law enforcement. The police chief implemented new training protocols emphasizing respect, implicit bias, awareness, and communication. The department partnered with local organizations to rebuild trust within the community. Angela also worked with lawmakers to draft legislation aimed at improving police accountability and transparency statewide. But the personal cost was real. Angela noticed subtle shifts in how some community members treated her whispers, cold shoulders, and occasional hostility. Yet, she remained undeterred. She knew that progress requires courage and persistence. The officer who lost his job struggled with public backlash. Interviews revealed a man grappling with his own prejudices and mistakes. The media portrayed him as a cautionary tale of what happens when power is abused. Angela's victory wasn't just legal, it was moral and symbolic. She had challenged assumptions, broken barriers, and forced an institution to reflect on its flaws. More importantly, she had reminded everyone that no one is above the law, not even those who enforce it. Her story inspired countless others to speak up, stand tall, and demand justice. In a world too often defined by division, stories like Angela's shine a light on the strength of truth and dignity. Months later, Angela reflected on that fateful morning. What started as a routine stop had become a catalyst for change. She'd received countless messages from young lawyers, aspiring judges, and everyday citizens, thanking her for her courage. At the same time, she urged viewers not to see this as a victory of one person over another, but as a call to action. To anyone watching, she said in a recent interview, "Never let fear silence your truth. Stand firm, speak clearly, and demand respect." As for the officer, his career was over, but the incident served as a hard lesson about accountability and the weight of responsibility. Angela's story didn't just end with headlines and court decisions. It sparked a movement. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next wild tale from Midsummer. Myths, because every story deserves to be heard, especially the ones that remind us what justice truly means.